The question I've been asked to talk about is, how does the agriculture contribute to climate change? It's actually rather an odd question, because it's much easier to list ways in which agriculture in the current model does not contribute to climate change than it would be to list the way it does. Everything in the current industrial model of agriculture is predicated on the use of fossil fuel and distancing the producer from the consumer with consequent use of more fossil fuel. So given that burning fossil fuel is probably one of the chief ways in which carbon dioxide is emitted into the atmosphere, I would say that pretty well everything about industrial agriculture contributes to climate change. I call it industrial because it's based on a manufacturing model which emphasizes mechanization, speed, and is designed to produce commodities for the market. This is very important because while these commodities may, some of them be food, most of them are in fact, excuse me, raw material or feedstock for either manufactured substances which are designed to resemble food, or for feed for animals, or of course for fuel for cars and other things. So this is not only a problem in terms of climate change, it's a problem because, as everybody knows, we are sooner or later, and probably within my lifetime, going to be running out of affordable fossil fuel. It's called peak oil. And because the dependence on fossil fuel is causing immense pollution and degradation of the environment upon which all of us depend. So that is direct from industrial agriculture in terms of things like intensive livestock operations, or, you know, I don't know, what would you call them? Chicken concentration camps or cattle prisons, which emit immense amounts of manure, which in a different kind of system is a good thing, in this system is a pollutant. Okay, I could go on and on and on. I could comment, for example, that it's not just the trucking, it's also the packaging and the disposal of the packaging which causes pollution. I'm not going to go there. I think you can figure it out. What I want to do is to comment that this is not news to the vast majority of people. Politicians may insist that there really isn't a problem, but people know there is. They've noticed. In the words of the International Assessment of Agriculture and Science and Technology, I think that's what it's called, it was an amazing international effort of hundreds and hundreds, I think about 400 experts from 80 countries, which looked at what's going on and wound up with a very, very simple conclusion: business as usual is not an option. But you see, I think people already know that. I think the explosion of interest in local food, the Eat Local campaigns, the fact that everybody I know who's been wrestling with cancer is eating organic food, the concerns about things like asthmas and allergies and all these health issues, not to mention diabetes, obesity, and other chronic diseases which are related to diet. People have started to think there's something in the food. There's something wrong with what we're eating that is contributing to, not say causing necessarily, but contributing to a lot of the health problems that we're trying to face. So people have started to take matters into their own hands. And they've started farmers markets, they've started something called a CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, which is, it's kind of like a relationship between a farmer and a group of people who eat food, where they give him money at the beginning of the year, and through the summer they get a box of produce. The guy who did the first one in Canada, his slogan was, "You've got your family lawyer, you've got your family doctor, you've got your family dentist, I want to be your family farmer." And that model is being used not just for food, certainly not just for vegetables, but for fish, for example, and right across the system. Direct relationships. Now, I said before that the industrial system is predicated on distance, and every piece of distance is an opportunity for profit and for control. And I'm sure it hasn't escaped your notice that that industrial food system is very tightly controlled by a very small number of players, whether it's at the supermarket end, where there's a handful in every part of the country, or whether it's at the end of the grain traders, where there's 4, or whatever piece of the system you look at. It's a very, very small group of people, what my husband Brewster Kneen calls sustainable oligopoly, who control the system, and their control is dedicated to profit for their shareholders. Now, that's not to say that they're evil and wicked human beings. It's to say that the purpose of a corporation is to return a profit to its shareholders. But the purpose of a food system is to feed people. And so people have started to recreate relationships between those who are able to provide food and those who need to eat it in a different model. Now, some years ago, the international peasant organization La Via Campesina came up with the term food sovereignty. And food sovereignty is a way of describing the principles on which I think the food movements in Canada and elsewhere around the world are working. And I've got to get my notes because I never get them all right. So, the first principle or pillar, if you like, of food sovereignty is that food is for people. Not for cattle, not for cars. The purpose of food is to feed people. Food sovereignty values food providers, which means that the people who are working the system earn a decent livelihood, whether they're flipping hamburgers or whether they're farmers or fishers. And of course, that's not what's happening right now. We're losing farmers hand over fist. Same thing with fish. It localizes food systems. So it puts, and this is the core of it, it puts the producers and the consumers together in their relationship at the center of decision-making about how the system is framed. We keep being told we have choice. We go to the supermarket, we have all this choice. Actually, we can choose, but only among that very limited range of items on offer, most of which, as Michael Pollan has carefully pointed out to us, most of which are derived from corn, and many of which are genetically engineered as well. The localizing food systems isn't just here in Canada. It's also really important that this is against the global food system. We put a globalized solidarity. So we're not going to have our food at the expense of people in other countries. We're not going to, either through trade or through aid, dump food on them so they can't produce their own. So another thing it does is put control locally and resist the privatization of what are referred to as natural resources, which in other language would be referred to as the elements upon which we depend in our environment for our health and our future. It builds on traditional knowledge, not to say we're going to go back, but we're going forward knowing that there are many, many other ways of operating, and uses research to support traditional ways of knowing rather than to develop technologies which are completely untested, like biotechnology. And works with nature, obviously, as I've said, rejecting this whole other paradigm. And the last thing, which is when we started working on food sovereignty here in Canada, and through the Food Secure Canada, we developed a project which we call the People's Food Policy Project, because we're creating the system on the ground, but we also need to have a policy framework which supports it, because right now the policy framework supports that other system. And which will enable people to transition from the old system to the new one. We don't want to lose people in the process. We don't want to lose farmers, fishers, or anybody, but we have to create something that's going to work. So the first thing we did was talk to Indigenous people on the basis of the idea that if they've been on this mass of land for thousands of years, they may have some ideas about how to operate. And the thing that they insisted is that food is sacred. Sacred not in the sense that it's something you worship, but sacred in the sense that it is that which makes us who we are. Or we could say it's central to culture and community, if you like. But if it is to be respected in that high level, then you can't commodify it. You can't manipulate life forms and call it a technology. You can't, in fact, solve the problems which have been created by technology through a different technology. You have to have a completely different kind of relationship, which is based on relationships between peoples, between producers and consumers, and between us and the world that we live in. And what's really exciting about this is that while we do need policies, and the People's Food Policy Project and Food Secure Canada are working very hard toward getting policies at every level, from the school board to the federal government, what has to happen is something that you can do in your own home every time you go to the grocery store or the farmer's market, or decide where and how you're going to get your food. Because you have a food policy. The federal government has theirs, and each of us has ours, with the guidelines that we use to decide how we are going to frame our own food system. And so you can take action today and tomorrow. You don't have to suddenly become an organic gardener, but you can do something that will begin to change the whole paradigm. And the neat thing about it is that really is fun.